This is a response to Ryan Beard's video about me published on April 24th, 2025, titled Disgraced Drama YouTuber Returns as a MAGA Grifter. Now, I could waste time addressing every lazy accusation, every sarcastic jab, every line written like it was focus grouped for Reddit karma, but that would entirely miss the point. Because I don't see Ryan as evil or even personally malicious for making that video about me. Ryan isn't my enemy, he's a symptom. A tool playing a part in a much larger, more insidious mechanism that isn't just attacking me, but everything that has made Western civilization as prosperous and enduring as it is. What we're actually dealing with here, folks, is a culture that elevates performance over principle and confuses mockery for moral authority. So this isn't even about one video, it's about an ideology that punishes change, devours sincerity, and calls that destruction virtue. So let's talk about leftism, specifically its current post-cultural Marxist form, which increasingly functions as authoritarian collectivism cloaked in the language of progress. This modern, hyper-politicized doctrine dominates elite institutions across the West, from academia to mainstream news media, pop culture, and large segments of the Democrat Party. It degrades public discourse through ideological conformity, moral relativism, and the constant rewriting of history and language. And while those promoting it may not fully recognize the roots of what they're echoing, the worldview often manifests in their arguments, assumptions, and instincts, even when delivered with humor or irony. Which brings us to the first rule of modern leftism. Redemption is not an option. Your past is permanent, your mistakes are immutable, apology is weakness, growth is suspect, and ideological evolution, unless it moves in one direction, that being only towards the left, is treated as betrayal. That's why they mock ideological change, why they call it grifting, because in this worldview, people aren't expected to grow, they're expected to conform. You see, to the left, the concept of repentance, of genuine transformation, is incompatible with a system built on moral exhibitionism. Grace requires humility, and humility doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. It doesn't feed outrage or flatter ego. Humility says, I was wrong, without spectacle. Grace says, you can be forgiven, without demanding humiliation. But in a culture ruled by performance, there's no use for that kind of quiet transformation. It doesn't give the crowd something to mock. It doesn't produce a villain to cancel. In fact, it threatens the whole system, because if people can change genuinely and without spectacle, then maybe public shaming isn't justice. Maybe outrage isn't truth. And if that's the case, the entire scaffolding of the left's cultural power begins to collapse. So to a leftist, when someone changes their mind, when they find deeper meaning, step away from the dogma, and begin speaking from conviction, the question isn't what led to this change, it's what's the angle? Because the assumption baked into this poisonous ideology is that everything must be transactional, that no one acts out of conviction, only for clout, validation, or profit. And that's projection in its purest form, because the modern leftist mindset is trained to see belief as branding and identity as a hustle. And how does that work? It's a system built on repetition and reward. Social capital, status, influence, visibility is earned by signaling the right opinions. But what makes an opinion right? It's not truth or principle, it's consensus within the activist class, media gatekeepers, and online mobs. The right opinion is whatever flatters the prevailing narrative, whatever aligns with institutional orthodoxy, and whatever makes you appear morally superior, at least in that brief moment. And performing the right outrage is just as essential for influencers, pundits, celebrities, and even everyday users looking for validation online. This means knowing which headlines to amplify, which villains to denounce, and which causes to hashtag, all timed precisely to the current cultural algorithm. It's not about moral clarity, it's about relevance. One week it's Ukraine, the next it's Palestine, one week it's Roe v. Wade, and the next it's climate panic or whatever pronoun enforcement is ticking their side off. These causes rise and fall like fast fashion, not based on depth or consistency, but based on visibility and clout. The cycle is driven by a combination of social media trends, influencer echo chambers, celebrity endorsements, and mainstream institutions desperate to appear on the right side of history. And as a result, outrage becomes a performance where the goal isn't to fix anything, but to be seen caring at the exact right moment. Because in this ecosystem, attention is power and moral posturing is a currency. This This is the emotional engine of the modern left. It elevates victimhood, not to bring healing or restoration, but to extract moral leverage. Personal pain becomes currency. Grievance becomes identity. And in that system, the wound must never close because the power lies in keeping it open. The goal isn't resolution, it's control. Not reconciliation, but dominance through perpetual grievance. That's why they can't let anything go. That's why their political memory is a trauma reel, always playing, never resolving. Every offense, every failure, every injustice, real or imagined, is archived, weaponized, and replayed for effect. Because if the pain ever healed, the power it grants would disappear with it. The power to silence dissent, to frame every debate around moral debt, to claim the upper hand in every interaction, not through merit or truth, but through emotional coercion. In this framework, the most aggrieved person holds the most authority, and the moral high ground is no longer earned, it's performed. And that's exactly why someone like Ryan can build an entire video around old clips, past controversies, and stale internet drama, because in his worldview, the past isn't something to learn from, it's something you're chained to. In reality, his purpose in dredging up the past isn't nostalgia, it's framing. Those moments are used as a lens to distort everything in the present. Every current belief I now hold, every video I make, is filtered through a storyline of failure and fraud. Not because he's seeking truth, but because in leftism, change itself has to be discredited. The left doesn't believe in private growth or personal renewal. They only recognize confession when it's public, performative, and degrading. The idea that someone might mature, reflect, or evolve in silence and come back stronger is foreign to them. In the eyes of the collective, growth isn't real unless it conforms. Redemption is impossible unless it flatters their narrative. And anything that breaks from the hive must be mocked, punished, or dismissed, because sincere transformation threatens the illusion of consensus, and they'll do whatever it takes to neutralize it before it affects the herd. Because in a system like this, transformation is a threat, not just to power, but to momentum. If someone can grow, if they can change without shame, then the cycle breaks, the machine stalls. So it must keep moving, which leads to a deeper flaw. Leftism doesn't just reject redemption, it lacks a moral ceiling. There's no endpoint. No moment where the revolution declares, we've won and now let's build, because building requires stability, hierarchy, discipline, and objective standards. All things the modern left rejects. So instead, it loops. It feeds on itself. The purity tests get tighter. The rules change faster. The allies become enemies. Today's activist is tomorrow's bigot. And when they can't cancel you for being what they deem their most recent version of evil, they'll settle for calling you embarrassing. This is the real function of videos like Ryan's, not to debate ideas, but to delegitimize the person holding them. It's high school politics dressed in Marxist aesthetics, where ad hominems become an acceptable strategy. They mock the appearance, but don't address the argument. They attack the tone, but never question the truth. They ridicule the symbols, faith, country, tradition, because those things anchor people in something higher than the collective, something they can't control, something higher than the mob. And that's the real threat, because a person grounded in principle can't be shamed into silence. So they focus on optics, not substance. The goal is to make dissent look ridiculous, not wrong, to frame sincerity as cringe, to frame conviction as cosplay. Because once belief is reduced to a costume, it no longer has to be taken seriously. And the beliefs most often treated that way, Christianity, patriotism, masculinity, aren't mocked because they're dangerous. They're mocked because they're independent. They offer identity without needing the left's permission. They root you in something eternal, something greater than yourself that doesn't require retweets or rainbow flags in your bio. That's why the left sneers at them. Because people who believe in something higher can't be controlled by people who believe in nothing. And at the core of this ideology is an unspoken truth. It hates people, and it will use them as a means to an end. It uses minorities as moral shields. It uses trauma as leverage. It uses the language of justice to accumulate more cultural power. And once someone no longer serves that function, once they speak the wrong way, platform the wrong idea, interview the wrong person, or break character, it doesn't matter if they check every leftist identity box on the planet. They're immediately disposable. And Ryan doesn't need to say any of this out loud. It's just baked into the format that he's adopting. These types of videos aren't designed to inform or engage. They're built to humiliate. They function as digital purity rituals, policing the boundaries of acceptable thought. The subtext is clear. Don't wander too far off. Don't question the script. Don't you dare change. It's not just criticism, it's a warning, a public spectacle meant to discourage ideological drift and remind everyone watching that deviation will be punished. But here's the thing, you can't run a society, let alone a movement, on shame, sarcasm, and suspicion. You can't build a future on mockery. At some point, the audience stops laughing and starts asking, what are you actually offering? Now, the left had decades of cultural dominance. They control the stories, they defined heroes, and this bitter, petty, exhausted worldview is the end result of all that dominance. Not progress, not unity, just a culture so hollow it can only mock what it no longer understands. There is no joy in it, no awe, no forgiveness, no transcendence, only followers desperate not to be the next target, only activists who eat each other alive to prove they're still pure, and only commentators who mine other people's lives for content because they've built nothing of their own that can stand without someone else to tear it down. Needless to say, that's not honest commentary. It's opportunism dressed as insight. The more dehumanizing, the more negative, the more scandalous it feels, the better it performs. Accuracy is optional, charity is obsolete, and what matters is the spectacle. It's a reality show on steroids, driven by algorithms that reward blood sport. And they all play their roles, cloaked in virtue to shield themselves from consequence. And if truth gets in the way, they don't confront it. They edit the script to match the narrative. But that kind of machine can't sustain a worldview because a worldview built on mockery, envy, and reactivity doesn't know how to build anything. It only knows how to punish, posture, and consume. Strip away the outrage, the sarcasm, the edits, and there's no center, no foundation, just fear of irrelevance, masked as moral clarity. A real worldview must offer meaning, purpose, a future, but all the left offers is a warning. Either you stay in line or you become the next punchline. But in the end, it doesn't matter how many jokes they make or how loud they scream. The truth has gravity, and once someone sees it, really sees it, they don't go back. Not because they're chasing attention, but because they're done pretending the counterfeit is noble. They've lived inside the machine. They've watched it eat sincerity, devour faith, and sell outrage as virtue, and now they're walking away, not in bitterness, but in God-given freedom. As for Ryan, I hold no grudges. I truly hope you're doing well, man. I pray that you find peace, not just career success or digital applause, but the kind of deep, steady peace that doesn't fade when the screens turn off. And I mean that sincerely, because at the end of the day, this isn't about winning arguments or settling scores. It's about telling the truth, standing firm, and walking in grace, even when it's mocked, especially when it's mocked. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.